Sigue en sintonía de nuestra programación.
Ahora empieza su programa, el show del doctor Roy Aranda. Temas sobre los efectos que tiene la separación de los niños de sus padres, traumas que afrontan los indocumentados, violencia doméstica, el porqué de la violencia en las escuelas. Llámanos en vivo al 1-888-900-2811, extensión 6, y haz tus preguntas al aire. ¡Comenzamos!
Good evening, dear Tribuna TV viewers. Buenas noches, queridos televidentes de Tribuna TV. Aquí estamos otra vez de nuevo, Diciembre 12. We're here December 12th with our next show. We will have another show on December 19th. Tendremos otro show, el último del año, the last of the year, on December 19th. Today it's a interesting, somewhat possibly sad, but hopefully we'll move into making it a better with more promises of a better holiday season for people who tend to experience what's called holiday blues, cuando se sienten tristes durante la época navideña. So that's pretty much the theme for today. The show, the title for today is From Candy Canes to Holiday Blues, Children and Stress During the Holidays. Of course, candy canes are a happy thing, right? People they like to get candy canes. It's associated with the positive feeling during the holidays. And of course, not everybody feels happy at this time of the year, hence the holiday blues. En español es el estrés durante los días feriados, durante la época navideña. So we're going to be, it's actually today what we're doing is really the first of a two-part show. I thought it was important enough, era bastante importante, having many volunteers, to appear as guests, and we have two wonderful guests today. Next week there will be another two guests. So I thought that we would split the show into two episodes. Today we'll be focusing on children and their needs and their experience of holiday blues, their sense of depression this time of the year. And next week it will be a closer look at adults. So there'll be some overlapping concepts, but children are not just little adults, even though many of them have similar feelings and some of the same reasons for which adults might experience a sense of depression or holiday blues or anxiety also exist in children. So I did want to let the viewers, quiero que sepan todos, that the show is being recorded live on YouTube right now, presently live. Está vivo en YouTube. By tomorrow, there will be a recording available on Tribuna TV's website, also on Facebook, Vimeo, and possibly on other social media platforms. So a partir de mañana, ya el video estará listo en Tribuna TV, Vimeo, y en Facebook. What I wanted to do then is to start with, I'm just going to mention, I will introduce our guest momentarily. We have as guest today Dr. Andrea Grunblatt, a psychologist, who I know from New York State Psychological Association, and Ken Neumann, who is an expert in family and divorce mediation, and I also know him through New York State Psychological Association. So we'll go over introductions, and I'm glad to say that both of them probably have longer CVs than mine, not necessarily because they're older, but because they're very accomplished. So they have really detailed CVs. It's a standing joke, guys. I mention CVs every show. So Don Oscar, por favor, me puede poner el primer slide. I will get into the introductions momentarily. I just wanted to start with an indication to my viewers of the inspiration for the show. Why is it that we are having? Why is it that I thought it was important to have this show? So I will share with you, with the viewers, that I lost my mom my mother on a December 13th, which happens to be tomorrow. Not only is tomorrow December the 13th, but it's also the Friday the 13th. That hasn't escaped me. That's a separate show. So I lost my mom to December 13th, and my birthday is December 30. So when she died, the Christmas season, the Christmas holiday died for me. Along with my birthday. I mean, it took me years really to try to regroup and work through not only the loss. I mean, we all experience loss and devastations and emotions when we lose a very dear and close person to us. But it was, for me especially, so close to my own birthday, especially so close to the holiday, and at a time that my own older son was coming close to a year of age. So I had to deal with all of that and realizing that he would be losing a grandmother. Even though he knew her because he was alive, he has no idea about her. So all of that weighed heavily on me. And it took a while. I didn't really have shows like this to fall back on, so I'm hoping that you all derive some benefit from this. And over the years, I slowly worked through it, and I'm glad to say that my heart, in terms of the holiday season, was healed. And I, once again, really look forward to holidays, enjoy them very much. But as well, as a psychologist professional with my own patients, and I have many Hispanos, many patients, not just many diverse culture patients, not just Hispanos, Latinos, but from many different countries and cultures and ethnic and religious backgrounds. I always made it a point to ask. I thought it was always important to ask, what is it that the holidays mean to you? How are you going to spend the holidays? What traditions do you have? And I realized that many of my patients were sad. They were depressed, lonely. They had all sorts of difficulties dealing with the holiday season. And I made it a point, of course, always of taking that into consideration, and for those who are really feeling depressed and down, to see what I could do to help give them what I call our anchors of hope. What is it that I could give them? What could I offer them to help them navigate this long season? The holiday season, good 5 to 6 weeks long. And afterwards, I would always ask with them, what is it that you did? How did you spend the holidays? And it didn't end there. The holidays stopped, but we don't just stop right then and there. It's not like all of a sudden you pick up where you left off and you're no longer sad if you were sad. But now you're faced with coping with a new year. What are your aspirations, your hopes, your expectations for the new year? And this is something that I always tried as well to make a positive thing for them. So it's in that vein, hoping to take something that might be stressful for many people, many of our viewers, and seeing if there's some way that we can offer some of these anchors of hope, coping strategies that they can fare better, cope more effectively, and enjoy the holidays better this year, and be, maybe better equipped for holidays in the future. So also, I did want to share with you some sentiments made by two of my patients. Puedes correrlo para arriba. One of my patients in English told me, and I summarize it very quickly, I can't buy gifts, I'm so sad, depressed, I'm less and less of a man. My wife has to work double time to pay bills. I feel like I'm getting worse. And in Spanish, a different patient, no poder hacer nada, I can't do anything, no poder trabajar, I can't work, problemas de dinero, financial problems. Me vienen tantas cosas en la cabeza, I have so many thoughts in my head. Lloro mucho, I cry a lot. So it is for my patients, for all the viewers, and for all those who may be feeling a bit down this time of the year that I dedicate the show. Oscar, por favor, slide 2. I just want to let you know the kinds of things we'll be covering, and then I will give a lengthy introduction to my guest for today. So today's show is going to cover things. How typical is it to feel sad during the holidays? You might be. I'm guessing that some of our viewers are well aware that it's something they are struggling with anyway. But how often do you see people say that they are upset about some aspect of the holiday season? What kinds of reasons for feeling down do children have during the holidays? Keep in mind that we're focusing more on children and during this show. What are symptoms of depression in children, so that viewers have an idea of some of the signs and things to be on the lookout for? Strategies for coping. What is it that you can do to cope with the holiday blues? And we'll end the show, as usual, with my providing resources for viewers. Okay, I'll give you several references, not only from our guests, but from professional associations. So without further ado, let me start by introducing Dr. Andrea Grunblatt. She is on the far right. Well, I look at her on the far right, so I guess she's on the right side of the screen. So Dr. Grunblatt is an internationally trained psychologist licensed in New York and Germany. She's a certified psychoanalyst, school psychologist, nationally certified group therapist. She belongs to several wonderful professional organizations. She received a PhD in psychology from the University of Bremen in Germany, after previously having studied at the University of Southern California, in Los Angeles, University of Hamburg, Germany. In Germany, Dr. Grunblatt is board certified as a psychodynamic psychologist for adults, children, our focus for today, and adolescents, part of our focus as well for today. In her 30-plus years of private practice in the Hudson Valley, which is upstate, she's in Kingston, right? Kingston, New York. She has treated hundreds of adults, children, and adolescents. She worked at a residential treatment facility for adolescents. She was clinical director, presented many clinical director of an outpatient drug and alcohol clinic in Kingston. She's presented many workshops. You're going to add this one to your CV, of course. And she has taught as an adjunct professor at the Marist College at the Cross Country University at the Psychoanalytic Institute in Manhattan. She's presented several papers to the New York State Psychological Association, of which I'm a member of, Eastern Group Psychotherapy Society, Northeastern Group Psychotherapy. Well, I'm glad I printed. I had a lot of paper, Andrea. I used a lot of my paper on you. She has a vast understanding of the needs of adults, children, and adolescents. She's past president of New York State Psychological Association Group Division, past president of Hudson Valley Psychological Association, board member of the Hudson Valley Guild of Mental Health Professionals for many years, member of National Association for the Advancement of Psychoanalysis, Society of Modern Psychoanalysts, the American Psychological Association, which is the big guru, the big parent association of all of our state psychological associations. The Eastern Group Psychotherapy Society. I made a presentation at that association last year, by the way, in Manhattan. They had a conference in Manhattan. I was one of the presenters there. American Group Psychotherapy Association, and she's a member of the Association for Play Therapy. So, welcome, Andrea. I need a quick break. So, is there something that I missed or you'd care to add? Say hello to everybody.
The one thing that I use very frequently these days is I'm also a certified sand play therapist, so I use sand play a lot.
We're going to get a demonstration tonight and make sand snowmen?
Excuse me?
Can we make sand snowman figures for the holidays?
Yes, we can use. Usually, what you use is you use certain miniatures in order to represent your feelings also.
Okay.
And your family constellation.
So, welcome, Andrea. Next, I wanted to introduce Ken Neumann. Ken comes to the mediation field having had training in child psychology, family therapy. He's been working in the field of divorce for more than 40 years. In addition, he has a background in business. He was the chief administrative officer for a non-for-profit organization for 15 years. Divorce mediation was a natural joining of Ken's therapeutic skills and his business interest. Ken started doing mediation in 1982. He was one of the founders for Center for Mediation and Training. The decision to form a center was a decision to make a long-term commitment to the mediation field. So those in the the viewers, mediation is really a process to try to help parents work through an amicable separation or divorce. I'm sure I hope I'm not.
I think that's a very adequate way to present it. An amicable that is in the best interest of their children, certainly.
Right. It's a way of avoiding ugly, prolonged court battles and expensive battles that involve lawyers for many years. I'm guessing it's something that at least the idea is to enhance communication and to see if there's a way of opening the door to more effective co-parenting?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. So he's been involved. Ken also has been involved in training of thousands of mediators. Over the years, his focus has been on tough cases. He's frequently called to work on with such couples. He's supervised countless mediators in the work. He's been at the forefront of developing new mediation techniques and processes, including team mediation, where both mediator and attorneys actively participate in the process from the very beginning. He has developed a detailed model on how to break deadlock in the typical custody case. In addition to being an active trainer, Ken is a frequent presenter at mediation conferences. Ken has served on numerous boards, including the New York State Council on Divorce Mediation, the Family and Divorce Mediation Council of Greater New York, the Association for Conflict Resolution Family Section, the Association of Divorce Financial Planners, and Child Fund of America, Inc. And again, welcome Ken, welcome Andrea. Ken, anything else? Say hello to everybody, and is there anything that I left out or that you could care to?
Thank you. Yes, you included everything. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks. So we have slides, I already indicated to the viewers the kinds of things that we will be looking at. So I wanted to start by opening up with slide 3, so it'll just at least give an idea of the scope of the kinds of issues that come up that may have something to do with holiday blues. So me puede poner Oscar slide 3. I'll just go through these quickly, Andrea and Ken, and then ask you to comment, expound on them, add something. And if I'm missing something that you'd care to add as well, this is perfectly fine. I always tell my viewers that the slides are I think that they're fairly comprehensive, but you can always add more and more and more, and it's always a matter of, sometimes you have too much and it's just overwhelming. So I try to do a formula of giving just enough to give the viewers really a good, solid introductory, preliminary orientation into the areas that the show focuses on. So I did want to share with you that, to begin with, as I mentioned before, it's a long period of time. It stretches from Thanksgiving to New Year's, which really means a little before Thanksgiving. I know that when I go shopping at BJ's and Costco and some other chains, already before Halloween, I'm beginning to see turkeys and some Christmas decorations and paraphernalia going up. And obviously, after New Year's, you're still dealing with people returning gifts, going back to work if they took time off from work, children returning to school, life picking up where it stopped, including having to go to court, having business meetings, whatever was put on hold continues. So we're really talking about a fairly long process, at least I would say a good 6 weeks. In a recent survey by the National Alliance on Mental Illness, NAMI for short, 68% reported that they were financially strained. That's a lot. That's a big number. That's over half. Also over half, 66% reported feeling lonely. 63% reported that they were feeling too much pressure during this time of the year. 57% had unrealistic expectations. 55% were remembering happier times. Years ago, years when maybe they had people who they lost since then around, or when work was better, they were more gainfully employed, financially more stable, living somewhere else. So for whatever reason, they're dwelling on some of these past happier moments. 50% were not with loved ones during this time of the holiday season. 43% of people are single. 27% living alone. 17% of singles are over the age of 65. So let's not lose sight of people and the aging cycle. Not that 65 nowadays modernly is, particularly old, but of course we need to keep in our mind that holiday blues is not just for children and adults, but we're also dealing with elderly people, with aging populations. What I thought was also very interesting is that the highest rate of child psychiatric hospitalization occurs in the winter time. And so we're dealing with children, so this is significant. And also a myth that's been propagated, and because we hear this so repeatedly, sometimes, and you follow the news, sometimes you hear something that's not real, but you hear it over and over and over and over again. After a while, you start believing that it is real. So it's a myth that suicides increase during holidays. That doesn't mean that you can say everything is fine and hunky-dory, because no. You do have to be aware of the presence of persistent symptoms or symptoms that are of greater severity. So people who are making verbalizations that life is not worth living at this point in time, or I would like to join my grandmother, or I really would like to go back to where I lost my doggie, my pet. I mean, those are things that you may really want to take a closer look at. So persistent symptoms, more serious symptoms, you do need to keep an eye on that. And we'll talk a bit about that further on. Andrea, any comments on this particular slide? Anything that you care to add to this?
I was thinking that there are some reasons for some of these things with feeling sad during the holidays, and that is the split between parents. If parents have split, the feeling of shared loyalties. How can you be loyal to one and loyal to the other? How can you go from one fun place and then you have to leave and go to another place which you don't know whether it's going to be fun or not fun? And I think one part is also that for kids, this is a very important time because there's a loss of structure because there's no school during that time. They're on vacation usually. And so the structure that's being provided in the school setting is not there at home necessarily. Or there's too much structure sometimes. And then there's the pressure to be happy because it's the holidays. And it's a lot of pressure, and you also, in order to please your parents, you have to pretend to be happy no matter what happens. And also the other thing I think is important to know is that with children, when they feel sad, it often ends up in acting out rather than a certain amount of sadness. Most frequently, younger children have a tendency to act out rather than to show that they're sad. And it's also hard for them to verbalize what is going on.
So acting out would be a way of a behavioral manifestation of an underlying emotion. I didn't mention earlier, but since you brought it up, I'll give like an example of acting out in my own life. I mentioned that that my birthday is in this month. Well, it happens to be December 30th, so in case you want to sort of keep that in your little book, okay? December 30.
We'll remember.
I was living in Spain. So at the time, one of the reasons why I speak Spanish fluently, my father was from Spain. And I was living in Spain, and on my 13th birthday, I went to visit my father's aunt, my great aunt, who lived. She was like in a relatively modest area in Valencia, and she lived like right in front of her was a train track, a commuter train track. And I would go visit her. I spent a year there, and I would go visit her regularly. On my 30th birthday, walking towards her house, I saw that there was a big commotion at the train tracks. And as I got there, I noticed that there was like a wooden box that I later found out was to put a body in it. People from the railroad working, burying blood stains with dirt, and I heard that a poor person, distracted, had been struck and killed by the train. But my point in terms of the acting out is that night, and I had always wanted a train set. So my father, who was in the United States, wired money to my mother, who bought me this really nice HO train set. I did everything possible not to go to sleep that night. I didn't want to go to sleep. I mean, I think I went to sleep when I couldn't keep my eyes open. And I was all the time having dreams about trains, but the acting out was I would put figures, toy figures, on the train tracks, and the toy figures were derailing the train. Is that an example of acting out?
It's an example of acting out, and it's also a wonderful example for what you can do in a sand tray.
Okay.
With miniatures. So it's both.
So this is totally spontaneous. I just thought I'd throw it out. Ken, any comments on these numbers, statistics, things like that? Because obviously we're seeing that a lot of people, even, you don't have to either be totally sad or happy. I mean, I'm giving you statistics. There's obviously a possibility of feeling happy, but also having moments of sadness and anxiety. It's not that you have all or none.
I think that, working with people going through divorce typically, I think the first year, the first Christmas, the first holiday season that you're divorced, for both children and parents, it's a tremendous change in everything. So, for example, if parents, and I'll talk later about some of the arrangements people have, but often people alternate the whole Christmas break, particularly when you have school-age children, and then you realize one day on a Christmas morning, you wake up and your children aren't with you. They're with the other parent in California or Florida. And so the first year in particular for parents, and I think it's more difficult for parents very frequently, that they don't have a child with them. The child will always have a parent with them, but then there's the question of, do you have both parents with you? So I think that the first Christmas season, the first holiday season, the idea that you wake up on Christmas morning and your children aren't with you, for some people is devastating, or can be devastating. And so how do they protect against it with support groups or other friends? So I think it's the first time this happens is always the most difficult. And when we talk about people getting divorced, when people are coming in, in the fall, we prepare them for this. We talk about it as what's going to happen.
Isn't it true that the first of anything after a traumatic experience is the most difficult? Like you suffer the loss of a parent, so the first birthday without that parent, your first birthday without that parent, your first July 4th without that parent. It's always like the first that seems to be really a big thing. And then beyond that, anniversary date. So if there was a divorce around the holiday, that would be an anniversary date.
Yes, I think we've all noticed as therapists that that's very much the case. But there's something, the idea that you can't see your children on Christmas Day, for some people is hard to imagine. It's really hard to imagine,
Okay, so
and
that's
it may happen,
That's something we'll talk about.
The other thing that I wanted to add
go ahead,
is
Andrea.
just, even though the first is very important, I think it's also important that people will more likely forget when it's the 5th or the 6th or whatever anniversary, and suddenly they just feel sad and they have no idea why. And if you go back into history and ask, so what happened around this time, then you'll find out, oh, this is when my parents got divorced, for example.
So it's dwelling there, like it's been dwelling for me, which is why I brought this up for the show at the very beginning. That's not necessarily a bad thing, because I think that sometimes bringing up the memories not only has a curative value, but has a way of keeping those memories alive, has a way of keeping that person in a way alive as well.
Absolutely.
Okay.
But what I meant is, when it happens for the first time, then everybody's aware and will understand. Whereas, and then it's more acute. Whereas if it happens on the 3rd or the 4th anniversary, people have forgotten what had happened to you during that time. So it's much more, you don't get as much support at that point.
And in fact, some people, you talk to them and they say, gee, I don't know why I'm upset. And then you talk further and they say, oh God, it's April. April was the month that my grandparents and my parents all got sick or died in. And they don't even realize it right away, I think is what Andrea is referring to.
Exactly.
They're not even conscious of it. And later on you realize, yes, wow, that's why I'm so upset and depressed this month, without even realizing till they finally make the connection or someone makes it for them. I think that's what Andrea is referring to, of course.
That is absolutely correct, Ken. And on top of that, often what is also being alluded to is that it's the seasonal affective disorder, which it may not be at all. It may be just because a person is being triggered because it's a time where somebody died or somebody got sick or something like that.
But you're also suggesting that at times people don't want to hear it anymore, like get over it already. Why you, Bob, heard this before. I don't want to deal with this anymore. Why are you bringing it up anymore? People can be insensitive, and that can be hurtful to the person who may have a need to say something spontaneously and be listened to and be heard, and that's a moment that's lost.
That's correct, yes.
Yes.
Okay. Oscar, por favor, pon slide 4. We're going to look, some of these things we've already covered. We're going to look at reasons for feeling down in slide 4. I'm going to look them over, and many of these were already covered, and feel free, Andy and Ken, to elaborate on some of these. Again, focusing on children. They're sad. They cannot get things that they want. They may not be able to get the toys that they want. They may not have access to a parent they want to see. They may not be able to go on a vacation that they want, and so forth. They can't get things they want. Some children might be teased or bullied by other children who have more. Usually when there's a separation and or parents are sick and there's financial issues, well, they're not going to be able to get you these wonderful toys or things that you can show off or that other children show off. So,
and there's one more factor with that also, Roy, and that is when the kid then gets less toys or less expensive toys, they may feel that it is Santa who doesn't love them as much because they were not as good a child.
So they have guilt feelings.
Yes, okay. Exactly.
Feeling lonely. Being sick or injured, or their parents are ill or injured. They are part of the being distressed piece. If the family's having financial difficulties, of course, the repercussions are going to go down to the children. Limited access to activities. Again, if there are either separations involved, illnesses involved, financial difficulties involved, you may not be able to go to outings as you were before. You'll have fewer of those kinds of outings. I have many of my patients with something like going out just to get a bite to eat or to take the children out to a playland or to a water park in Riverhead. And they're thinking, I'm not going to be able to afford the $50, to do this, and the food, and the children are crying and carrying on, and that's very, very stressful. So loss of a loved one, family separations with or without somebody having passed on. Separation or divorce of parents. Again, this is something that both Ken and Andrea were talking about. Moving, relocating, going from one place to another. All of a sudden you lose everything that was near and dear to you. And of course, this is very significant if you are from another country. So for many of my Hispanic patients who are coming from El Salvador, Honduras, Guatemala, Dominican Republic, and they're suddenly coming over here, there's huge differences. Even something like going from California to New York inside the United States, moving is going to be a big ordeal, a big thing. Remembering happier times, we talked about that briefly, and situational demands. Situational demands, anything that may come up on a given occasion that, somebody, your parent for whatever reason has to go into a hospital for some tests, so you're having to cope with those situational demands, or all of a sudden there's some incident taking place that involves your family. You have to deal with that. So this is what I mean by the situational demands. Boy, this I got a slide.
There's two more things also, Roy?
Sure, by all means. Oscar's going to lift the slide, and feel free to continue to elaborate.
For example, if your parent gets remarried right around the holidays, and that means it's a final separation for the child.
Oscar, ¿no quieres sacar el slide?
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah.
And the other one is that if there's another child that's born during that time, and it may not, could be from the same parents, it could be from a stepchild that's born, and the child may not be particularly happy about that.
Yeah, you're having to deal with step parents and step siblings.
Yeah.
And of course, an allegiance.
Or also just a sibling, also, Yeah. Sometimes children are not particularly happy about a sibling.
Wasn't I enough for you?
Ken,
Exactly.
anything to add, Ken, in terms of separations and all of that?
Yeah. All the attention is being given to somebody else besides them.
Ken, do you have any other comments on that slide?
Yeah, I don't. So what is it? I don't see the slide actually. What is it?
It was slide 4, the one that I was reading, reasons for feeling down.
Yeah, I think what I wanted to say was that how well parents coordinate during the holiday, how well they coordinate with each other, will make it easier or more difficult for their children. So, for example, the parents should coordinate, when we talk about presents, because we think about presents, parents should coordinate about buying presents together for the child, a special present. Parents should also be aware to help particularly a young child buy a present for the other parent. We talk about this in mediation, that parents need to help the child make a card or buy a present for the other parent, because then everyone's there at one family gathering and the child has no present for a parent and they feel bad. So parents have a particular obligation to help their children feel okay by supporting their buying gifts for the other parent. Even if they're upset with the other parent, they should be able to do that. And they should coordinate and not try to outbid each other and buy bigger and bigger presents. Now, some children will undoubtedly take advantage of this and say, well, how many of these are you getting me? I heard this tonight from someone, how many of these Transformer figures am I getting from you? Daddy's getting me 5. How many are you getting me? So children, if parents are uncareful, children will play them off against one another. But parents' real obligation is to help their children get through the first holiday when they're not all together in the best way possible.
Well, children and adults will look at quantity and tie that into an expression of love. You got me this many. That means you love me more than the other one. So it's sort of like a a way of trying to have value and meaning in the eyes of the parent.
Yes, of course. That good point. Yes. But the parents need to coordinate even more than they did before, and we're asking people to coordinate with each other who aren't particularly getting along well. You have to put your children before yourself and your own feelings, particularly if one parent feels that they've been rejected by the other parent who may be with another person right now. And how not to badmouth that other parent and the other person and the person that parent is with. So it's a real task, and a lot of people have problems. A lot of parents have problems with this task because they're so hurt. It's a real wound for them, however you want to call it. And parents have to try very hard to make it better for their children, and it'll make it better for them if they can really do that, of course.
So this is a combination of education and a combination also of somebody willing to break the ice and going out and being the first one to shop with your child for the other parent as a way of sort of modeling the behavior. The child will feel bad if they don't have a gift for the parent, if they're at the appropriate age when you would do that, I think. And so it's a real task, and we have to teach and help parents with that. That's not something people's lawyers are going to tell them, you can be sure. Yeah.
The people's lawyers aren't going to remind them of this. People's therapists are, and people's mediators are.
I think it goes even further also. It has to include the step-parent as well.
Well, good point, Andrea. Yes, we would want to get gifts. It's very hard to say, I want you to get a gift for a mom to say, yes, and for Christmas, Hanukkah, I want you to also get a gift for your stepmom. It's not everyone who can naturally come to do that. Very good points, yes.
But by doing that, though, it opens up the door to having a healthier distance relationships.
Right.
Absolutely, of course.
And I think often what parents also forget is that if they talk badly about the other parent, they are actually talking badly about half their child.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm half of him. How can you talk badly about him? You're then really talking badly about me. If he's a bad person, then it makes me a bad person. Yes.
Exactly.
Oscar, puede poner slide 5, el 5. We're going to look at some of the symptoms of depression. We've covered symptoms of depression, anxiety on other shows, but I think it's important to take a look at it because not everything would automatically come to your mind as being symptomatic of a feeling depressed. So symptoms of depression in children, you have increased feelings, for instance, of sadness, being down, irritability, anger, worthlessness. I'm no good. I'm not a good child. Guilt. Maybe I had something to do with these problems. If I hadn't asked for so many gifts, my parents wouldn't be having financial problems. I was so angry at my mother that I wish something bad happened to her, and now she's sick, and it's my fault that she's sick. So you have children live, certainly young children, the younger children live in a magical world. And they have these thoughts that sometimes, I thought something or I said something and I'm responsible for it. And it can be really horrific for a young child to say, well, I wished my mother would disappear because I was angry at her, and now all of a sudden she had an accident, and obviously I had something to do with that. You see things like problems sleeping, problems with appetite changes. It could be either too little or too much, or binge eating, or all sorts of ups and downs in terms of how the eating takes place. Physical complaints of all sorts, headaches, stomach aches, those would be typical in children. Loss of interest in activities. Maybe they were involved in sports. Maybe they were involved in video games or in certain kinds of outings that the family would go to or take them to, or visits with other people. And now they're just not interested. They've locked up. They tend to prefer to be more isolated. Changes in schoolwork. That's usually a big indicator that something is going on in your child's life when school functioning changes. You see dropping of grades, absences from school, complaints of not feeling well in school, not wanting to go to school. That's very important indicator for parents of something going on.
The other side too, that if a kid suddenly wants to stay longer at school and do all this special activity after school,
maybe because they're avoiding stress at home.
Yeah.
And I think a good point you make is that children, in their omnipotent way, if you will often blame themselves. I've heard for their parents' divorce.
Right.
If I would have kept my room clean that day, mommy and daddy wouldn't have had a fight. A 5-year-old would say, not infrequently, that children tend to see the world through themselves in what we might call an omnipotent type way, and will always blame themselves. And parents make it worse. If they don't make it better, they're going to make it worse by, in some ways, joining them. And in fact, parents sometimes even blame their children actively. So we have to, as therapists, as mediators, help parents with that. Again, I don't think lawyers are doing a lot of that work at this point, but they should be as well. Judges will certainly do that kind of work, though.
Changes in behavior.
The blaming is more towards teenagers, though, most often.
More towards teenagers, yeah.
Rather than younger children.
Changes in behavior, that's another big indicator, a big sign for parents. The child who now wants to become more withdrawn, more aggressive, stays out later, is more disrespectful to the parents, argues more, fights more with siblings, doesn't want to see friends. There's these behaviors. My child, I knew what my child was doing. I had an idea of what he or she was like, and now a lot of this has changed. For somewhat older children, experimentation with alcohol and drugs, the increased withdrawal and isolation, that would be a manifestation of a behavioral change. I didn't put down in this list more manifestation for the adolescents, but maybe perhaps sexual experimentation, sexual acting out.
And self-mutilating behavior, like cutting, scratching, picking, and also there's eating behaviors, eating changes,
Okay, puedes sacar el slide. Ken, you're about to say something?
Yeah, no, I think that we do see self-harming by children, and even self-mutilation, not just by girls, but by boys now, increasingly so. We're seeing much more of that among, 13-year-olds, 12-year-olds even. So we're getting...
Or younger.
Or even younger now, yeah.
Yes.
I mean, if you can't feel anything, if you cut yourself, with something sharp, you'll feel that. At least you can know you can feel things that way.
Isn't that, Andrea, a form of an acting out behavior?
I wouldn't call it acting out. It's acting out perhaps by definition, but really the self-harm is more complex, and I think people self-harm when they want to feel something, in a sense. What do you see that as, Andrea?
Well, I see it more as children wanting to be in control of the pain or of a feeling. So they may feel a lot anyway, but the self-harming is a way to be in control of the feeling, of the sensation that you have.
Yes, you're not in charge any longer of making me feel bad. I can do that. I can be in charge of that myself, my feeling bad, by cutting myself. So you're no longer in charge of it. Yeah.
And I can also determine the extent of it.
I'm in total control of it, yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And often that happens, in situations where you feel like you're not in control. That can be whether a mother or a parent is hurt, can be whether a parent gets divorced, can be many reasons why one would do that.
Okay. Let's take a look at some things that people can do to help their children cope with holiday blues. Oscar, por favor, slide 6. And, Andrew, Ken, feel free to chime in as well. I'll read what's on the slide, in case, since you're not able to see it. Coping with the holiday blues, el 6.
Well, how do you start new ways to celebrate holidays, new traditions? I think we learn and we counsel people that they are going to have to start new traditions, to deal with holiday blues and do something special. Start new traditions. Yes, you'd always do this, but now we're doing this. And introduce that in a proper way, I think.
And with the new traditions will come a host of new memories, and then you can sort of like talk to your child about that. We were talking about, Ken, you had mentioned it, like really the first, when there's the first separation. So parents can make plans.
The first Christmas, for example, the first Thanksgiving, and people are talking about that now a lot. After the parents separate, I think the parents have to be reassuring and be very careful not to get into fights. There's a lot of tension around holiday anyway, perhaps, not to get into any big fight, because that's going to play so poorly on the child, of course. And while all parents know not to fight in front of their children, it sometimes doesn't hurt to remind people of that, parents of that.
So we were looking at parents can make plans in advance. So obviously, this is a way of providing a bit of a structure. So keeping the child involved in part of it. Okay, so you're going to be seeing mommy on such and such a date, and I'm telling you now that's part of the plan. I'm not springing it on you. It's not a surprise. I'm not dropping you off and here you go, goodbye. But it's something that's been talked about, and not just like in terms of separation, but plans in terms of planned activities, planned shopping. We're going to go to a store. We're going to go to a mall. I know that you guys are interested in buying a new video game, and that's fine. Mom and Daddy are going to get you one new video game. We're going to stick to that one new video game. So things like planning ahead and having limits and then sticking to the limits. Looking for ways to have...
There's one more part with that, is that it's important for the child to be somewhat a part of those decisions, so that they feel that they're somewhat in control as well over an uncontrollable situation, which is really important, because with a divorce or with a hurt or illness of a parent, the child feels completely out of control. So the more control within reason you can give the child, so for example, give them choices. What would you prefer? Would you prefer to go to dad first and then to mom, or would you prefer to go to mom first and then to dad? So some control over that would be very helpful to the child.
Right, so not just grab them by the hand.
So little in control as it is,
right.
To have so sense of control over your life is pretty important. And by the way, you talk about, I think a good point also, Roy, is planning. Most post-separation problems can be solved by good planning ahead of time between the parents. We need to counsel parents and teach parents how to plan ahead in a way they didn't have to before. If you're living together with the other parent, you can be very spontaneous, and that spontaneity really can't exist anymore. You need much more careful planning, and children need to feel taken care of and safer. If the parents are in charge, while even giving them choices, they'll feel taken care of and safe, in fact.
You've got to be able to listen to your child, ask questions, talk. But listen means really listening. You've got to listen and sort of paraphrase what your child said to you to make sure that you heard it correctly and that your child realizes that you're not listening, not just and you're trying to get over it as quickly as possible. Really giving them the time to talk, the respect to listen to them, and to consider what they say is important. And I think that that's something that parents can do and be supportive and reassuring when they're doing it, especially if a child is feeling guilty about some aspect of whatever it is that's going on during the holidays that's leading to a feeling of depression.
Yeah, put the cell phone away, for example.
Yes.
It's a difficult thing. We tend to live on our cell phones. I go on a train anytime that I take the Long Island Railroad or Amtrak, or I'm going somewhere and I look, and usually about 80% of the people that are around me in any given, wherever it is that I sit, are on their phone or iPad. They're either on their phone reading it, looking at it, texting, or whatever. They're living on the phone. Crossing streets also. So we really have to take breaks. And taking a break is not a bad thing. Take a break and have fun. You also want to be able to teach your child not to rely so much on just looking at TV or being on the phone. Children who are sad, depressed, isolated, and certainly those who are dealing with separations in the family or divorce, I'm sure that they're going to pull away more and be more inclined to want to escape to television, phone calls with friends, texting friends, relying on social media and using the phone. Am I right or wrong about that? That's
and video games on top of it.
This may be one of the most serious problems that we have to work with as therapists and mediators today, is children's use of screen time. And by the way, just as another point, it should not happen that one parent, without discussing with the other parent, buys their child a cell phone for the first time, a smartphone in particular. That's a decision that one parent should not make on their own. It's a joint decision. It may be as important as getting someone a car these days for a 10-year-old. What's the age at which parents should have to agree on what's the age at which a child should have a cell phone? And you can't have two cell phones. No, this is just to call daddy. This one's to call mommy. We have to be very aware of the technology we live in today. And social media, a joint decision has to be made on what kind of social media should a 10, 11, or 12-year-old be on, and how do parents monitor that. And it can't be different in each parent's house, particularly at Christmas time. The wish to get a cell phone is a very important decision, and I understand that.
Well, I guess it's also important to be aware of the parent who wants to become the child's best friend.
Yes.
You know, and they sort of yield and they give in all the time, as opposed to the parent that everything's no, more controlling and dictatorial. But you also don't want, as a hypothetical, a adolescent teenage girl, and for her mommy to be her best friend, or for the mommy to say, my daughter's my best friend, and they're sitting there chit-chatting, and it's almost like it's okay, like we're the dynamic duo. And that's not necessarily a good role model or a good example for the child. You have to be able to set limits. And as you said, if there's going to be a cell phone, there has to be a reason for it. I can think of a legitimate reason for safety. Somebody, is out, I need to make a phone call, I'm stranded, for safety purposes. Contact, yes, not necessarily to be able to text and chit-chat whoever you want on the planet. So there have to be some limitations.
Parents using the cell phone is following the child and following the child and the other parent. This could be a whole other show on how we deal as psychologists with cell phones and social media. That might be an interesting show to have in today. I mean, I have so many cases where that's come up, post-separation, post-divorce. Yeah, that would be an interesting show. We would be glad to come back and do that show, I'm sure.
We'll do a technological advance in phobia and addiction
show. Doesn't have to be post-separation. Yeah, that's a good point, Andrea. It's there all the time. Yes, as you point out quite accurately, where I go on a subway train and I'm looking, 80 to 90% exactly of the people. No one's reading the New York Times anymore and trying to fold it in place. Everyone is on their phone, on their device. Yes.
Actually, they found out that there's a lot more concussions and whatever that happens to people because they're texting while walking, and they fall, or they hit their head on something.
Okay.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
I have one more question to ask you, and then we're going to have to move into examining the resources, because we're coming close to the end. To what extent do you think that TV shows and movies that depict holidays and holiday blues and heroes and things like that, and Home Alone with Little Kevin, to what extent does this bombardment of holiday and seasonal kinds of shows. To what extent does that have some sort of an impact on the emotions of a child?
Well, I think it has to do with the fact that the kid is being shown what a wonderful time this is supposed to be, and then the reality hits that the time may not be so wonderful. It may not be such a wonderful time, and not all the problems in the world get solved because suddenly the princess finds her prince or whatever. It's very unrealistic, and at the same time, there's the other part again. If this doesn't happen to you, then Santa doesn't love you as much. And that means that you weren't as good.
All right.
So I think it has a major effect on the children.
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts about the role of TV and movies and things like that in terms of shaping and developing human behavior. We're coming to an end, though. Oscar, ¿puede poner slide 7? So on slide 7, this is resources, and there we go. Yeah. Uno más. Here you'll see I'm providing the viewers with information for getting in touch with Dr. Andrea Grunblatt and with Mr. Ken Neumann. At the top, Andrea, and right underneath that, Ken. Andrea from Grunblatt Psychology and Counseling Offices, PC. Her address is right underneath that. The phone number, email, and website. Ken from the Center for Mediation and Training. It's in Manhattan. I give a phone number and a website as well. New York State Psychological Association. I am a past president of New York State Psychological Association, so I'm always happy to promote NISPOM. And I've provided you with a website and a phone number. Website and phone number for the American Psychological Association, which is the parent organization of all of the state associations. So if you live in New Jersey or in California or in Texas or in Vermont, all you have to do really is just go on the internet and type in New Jersey Psychological Association, California Psychological Association, Texas Psychological Association, and you'll get immediately their website, and these are the state associations. The APA is the parent organization. I also provided you with a reference to the National Alliance on Mental Illness, NAMI. You have the website and a phone number. There's a tremendous wealth of information available on their website. I encourage viewers who have the time and, of course, the internet technology to do so, go there. You'll find stuff on holiday blues. You'll also find stuff on depression, on anxiety, on anger, on coping with traumatic events, coping with hurricanes, with tornadoes, mental illness. There's all sorts of things there. So, Andrea, any final parting comment to the viewers? We're coming to an end, and I'm squeezing in the last few minutes before Oscar gets out of his chair and pulls me off of my chair.
I think the main thing is, even though we talked about all the dangers and the downfalls of the holidays, just enjoy your children and have a wonderful time during the holidays, and try to be a family, try to have fun, try to do some board games or other fun games or fun activities together.
Ken?
And I think that some families really can spend, even though parents are separated and divorced, when they get past the initial anger, can really consider spending some time together as a family. We're still a family. I always teach people that even though mommy and daddy are getting divorced, we're all still a family, and that the holidays are a good time to reinforce that we're still a family, and we will always be a family.
Okay, so my own message to the viewers, thank you for being here tonight. And I really want to leave you all, especially those of you who might personally be feeling sad or depressed this time of the year, or you've lived through it before, or you have children who are exhibiting some symptoms of depression and behavioral changes. I wanted to leave you with really an upbeat, more positive type of outgoing remark. There's always light at the end of the tunnel. Things can always get better if you put some effort into it. You do have to know when to reach out for professional help, either people like Andrea or Ken. You can contact me. Obviously, you can contact family counselors, social workers, psychiatrists. You can contact people, religious counselors as well. Point is, don't isolate yourself. But on the other hand, don't not do something. Don't fail to do something and wait for things to get better. If you wait, unfortunately, sometimes you may wait too long and you'll regret the outcome if you waited too long. But things can get better. There's light at the end of the tunnel, like I said. There's a silver lining. You have to be willing to empower yourself. You have to give yourself permission to want to have fun and enjoy the holidays. You need to give that opportunity to your children and look for things to do. Look for ways to get out there. Try to communicate with your neighbors. Try to pick up with people that maybe you lost some contact with. Try to resume some contact with family members, with friends. This is a time to think, a time to ponder, and to really appreciate what you have. So I'm being told that I have to exit. Otherwise, I'm going to start feeling the blues from Oscar. I remind you, the show's being recorded. Next week, we're having part 2 of the show. Andrea, thank you so much for coming. Ken, thank you so much for being a guest.
Thanks for having me.
My viewers, thank you so much for being here. And please, 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 be safe, be healthy. Have a wonderful rest of the week. Enjoy tomorrow, Friday the 13th, and I'll see you all next week, okay? So bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Sigue en sintonía de nuestra